food that goes into your system with no complications and no, and the reason is because it's a rather complex cascade of events that has to happen. And there's all these different enzymes that have to be there, digestive enzymes, digestive acids. And there's hundreds of them that have to happen to digest a complete meal. And if just one of them doesn't show up, you've got a problem. You know, like, for example, lactose. You've heard of lactose intolerance. There's different levels of lactose intolerance. You know, some people, it's severe, and they know about it, because every time they drink milk or they eat cheese or something, they have these cramps in their belly. Other people, they barely notice it, only if they drink a lot or, you know, because it's not so severe, but they still have it. And what it is just the enzyme that breaks down the lactose sugar, which is called lactase, is not there in sufficient quantities, or it's not there at all. And that creates that allergy, or that, and it's very inflammatory, and it's very bad. And so every food item has its own enzyme. You know, vitamin B12 needs a particular enzyme to extract from the food. Vitamin B6 needs another one. Vitamin B1 and 2, they're all different enzymes. So all these food components need all these enzymes, and we take it for granted. They're all going to show up. They're all going to be there. And however, the fact of the matter is, they don't. And in some people, they are more complete, and other people have more problems with it. And but in the end, what it means, if it's not perfect, is that inflammation will be generated. So when you eat, you do it for the purpose of nurturing your tissues, your organs, and so on. And instead, what happens is that you're generating inflammation. And it's a big, huge stress factor for your system. So the adrenal glands, the adrenals, which sit on top of your kidneys, rather small glands, manage your stress. They produce the stress hormones like cortisol and epinephrine and so on. And so every day when you eat, and you're supposed to be nurturing, you know, your system, it actually causing stress. And under these circumstances, you will not be able to lose any weight. You have to address that issue, to harmonize that, and find out what those foods are, and either get rid of the allergy, which there's ways of doing that, or avoid them if it's serious enough. And you may have noticed, like places like Wegmans, they have a huge gluten-free department now, because it's so prevalent. Gluten allergies are so prevalent that.
We're going to stop right there, Dr. Straile, Bob.
Yes.
We're going to stop and do another.
I already did it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So different conditions, you know, like clinically, you know, when I treat somebody for asthma or for obesity or for arthritis or for fibromyalgia, it's very similar. The clinical picture, the issues that they have, the inflammatory issues are very similar. One of the big stressors is sensitivities or allergies, especially to food. But there's airborne things, and there's, you know, there's a few allergies that you may know about because they were so severe that now you know you're allergic to latex or allergic to penicillin, which is a mold. Okay. So, you know, in order to lose weight, we got to address those two items. The least amount of toxins, so the body doesn't have this big need to store all these toxic substances that it cannot get rid of, and reducing the inflammation from allergies and sensitivities and so on. And then you also should know your genetic makeup as much as possible. And of course now we have all this genetic testing that's available, which is great. But at the moment it doesn't mean all that much yet, because we don't know what to do about it, how to repair genes, you know. But for example, one basic thing that you should be aware of is, for example, is your blood type. Okay? So how many people here, who knows their blood type? Whoa, well, you've all donated blood? Okay, good. So it's a very important information in the sense that it tells you something about who you are, okay? So blood type O, for example, is the oldest blood type, is still the most common blood type, even so it's recessive. So it's getting less and less, but it still is. The big mixing has just begun last few hundred years. But what that means is the oldest blood type, meaning that those people way back when, they were hunters and gatherers. They lived out in the wild. They hunted and they collected berries and nuts and they ate meat. They didn't settle down and do agriculture yet. And that type of information is in your system, okay? So when you're planning a diet, for example, and your blood type O, you wouldn't want to be a vegetarian, a strict vegetarian. It would not be healthy. You would be defeating yourself. Doesn't mean that you have to eat all these mountains of meat, but you can't work against that genetic makeup that's within you. You have to work in harmony with that and keep that in mind anyway. So then blood type A is when people started to settle down and started to grow grains and started farming, like in Europe, Central Europe, Europe. And those folks, on the other hand, they need grains. They can't really go without grains. They live on grains. That's what their forefathers have done for generations. And they do well with grains. And they'd be good vegetarians if they wanted to be. And then blood type B is more in Asia and in Eastern Africa, along the Indian Ocean, just people that eat a lot of fish, that kind of live on those coasts from Africa across to India and so on, all the way into Japan. It's predominantly blood type B, which means these people eat a lot of vegetables and a lot of fish. And while one doesn't have to strictly adhere to those categories, but you don't want to work against them either. So those kind of little knowledge about yourself is important to kind of plan your strategy on how to get some kind of balance into your glandular system, into your body. And it's the glands that have to manage all the day in and day out metabolism and so on, including the enzymes. So that includes like your father and mother and grandfather and what they had. So if your grandmother had diabetes and your mother had diabetes, that number one doesn't mean that you have to get it, but you have to kind of take precautions. So it means that they were vulnerable to developing diabetes. And of course now it gets a little bit more complicated. The question is why, okay? So, for example, on the Onondaga Nation there, diabetes is sky high. Everybody has it there. And why is that? Well, it's because they eat like we do, but they're blood type O. They're not used to eating white flour. White flour makes them sick. But that's what they eat because it's cheap and it's easy, whatever. If they would just eat like their forefathers ate, which means probably corn, they would do much better with corn. And I mean, that they can't really deal with alcohol. So there's certain things that are in their genes that predisposes them to that. And once you know that, and then you can make decisions of lifestyle changes that you can prevent those pitfalls, and those inflammatory consequences. So then, yeah, and everybody has, it doesn't matter where you come from, whether your ethnic background does matter because that's what your genetic makeup is. And what those folks back then ate is what your body is used to. You can't just completely change that, It's like when you see blood work, it's always amazes me that there's like two numbers. There's the numbers for the regular population, and then there's numbers for African Americans and separate numbers. their kidney disease numbers are lower, meaning or higher, whichever way you want to look at it. And that's because it's like a curve, you know. Got to give it a curve. So again, it has to do with diet and lifestyle, and they're not really eating all that well. So then the third point is know your food. Okay, know your food. Not only are you what you eat, but you are what you ate. That's the real bummer. So when it comes to food, so let me see. I have another story. Okay, yeah. I already explained that. It's a stress syndrome. And, okay, now, by the way, there's a lot more stressors than just the food and, you know, like the pathogens that are around us are constant. You know, there's bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi. In this room right now, there's viruses and bacteria galore. In fact, you know, your bodies are made up of 100 trillion cells, between 70 and 100 trillion cells. And they all communicate, which is what I try to listen to, those communications, to see what the body is struggling with, what the quirks are, what the communication problems are. And do you know that there's even more microbes living within that body, meaning bacteria mostly, all kinds of different bacteria. A lot of them are on the inside, like part of the digestive tract. And they benefit us, you know, unless they get out of balance, in which case there's a problem. But the pathogenic bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi, yeast, and so on, very stressful to the body. So when you, for example, so we take it for granted, you know, you go through a day, everything's fine, you feel good, no pain, or very little pain, and then all of a sudden, you know, you have this body ache, everything hurts, all the muscles and kidneys hurt, everything hurts, and you realize, like within a few hours, you say, I'm getting the flu, I got the flu. And why is that? It's not the virus that's causing all this discomfort and all this body ache. It's actually your system of survival. Your body is realizing there's a virus, and it's actually temporarily abandoning just a regular cleanup. In this case, uric acid, which causes gout. That it has to focus and concentrate on getting rid of this virus, planning or waging a defense against that virus, that it has to neglect temporarily the cleanup that we take for granted. And that's why you get so achy. And as soon as the virus is under control, you know, it can come back to what it's supposed to do on a daily basis. I mean, it's that you know, the energy that we have is that limited, if you want to call it that, or it just has to be allocated. So what I'm trying to say is that bacteria, viruses, parasites are a big stress factor to the system. And so, you know, mosquito bites have viruses and fungi in them. Spider bites are real nasty. You've heard about the tick bites that cause Lyme and so on and so forth. They're all stressing the system, and a lot of times the system takes care of it and we're not even aware of them, unless we get really ill, in which case